Hello, everyone. We are so excited you're here and welcome, Dave. We are live. Wait, you're not in the studio.
I am not in the studio. I am in Chicago today at a client's trying to get this
Wow.
done. I told them I had to step away for 30 minutes so I could do the recording because I didn't want everybody to miss out on a week of not having question and answer.
Now, last week I was gone because I was traveling and we were in the middle. So look at you setting this up. I really appreciate this time.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to be here. Glad we can finally get back together with the two of us.
And how did last week go? Because I usually slaughter everything. So I want to make sure you held it together for me.
No, it's much better when you're here. I will say I enjoyed having Brian on the show. It was great to have him here and to be able to let everybody understand the expertise that he has and he brings to the table as we work together. But we're glad to have you back.
Good. Well, it's good to be here. I'm glad that you're taking some time out of your Chicago. Now, you're with a client. You're not up there for fun, right?
No, there's no fun on this trip. It's basically 3 solid days of doing estate planning, financial planning, all kinds of heavy lifting work for their situation.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you're able to help them out and help us at the same time. So how cool this is.
Yeah, no, perfect opportunity to get together here. This is great.
And for those joining us live for the first time, or if you've been here before, we do this Q&A. So we have a whole bunch of questions already laid out for Dave. But as you're watching, please go ahead and submit your retirement questions. And that way we can throw them to Dave as well as we get time in between. Also, let us know where you're watching from. And again, we have this live on Facebook and on YouTube. We're so grateful that you're here. And Dave, if you're ready, let's get into it and start getting some questions answered.
Yes, let's get started.
All right. My first one I have is from Tina. And she's asking, what if they drop the provisional income that makes your Social Security taxable?
This is a question that many people are asking because if you look back at the calculation for the taxation of Social Security, it was brought about back in 1983 by President Reagan when he made changes to the program by bringing both sides of the aisle together. But they've not inflation adjusted the provisional income calculation. So here we are 27, 28 years ahead, and nothing's been changed. So the discussion many people are having is saying, hey, what is going to be done in the future? Is it going to be taken off the table completely? If that happens, I think our planning, though, just becomes more and more important because the more we can get to a tax-free and risk-free environment, the better off we're going to be. We can't predict everything, but if it changes, that means we're even in a better position. If it changes and we haven't done any of the planning, well, now we're even in a worse position. We're going to run out of money even faster. So.
Do you find people that are in this situation right now where they're just kind of saying, hey, planning, I should be doing it, but I'm not, and they're sitting on the fence right now trying to decide what to do?
Yes, I do all the time. That's one of the biggest concerns I have is people just aren't moving forward. And a part of it I get. I mean, we've had a lot going on over the last year. We've got a lot of uncertainty out there, but now's really the time to start taking action. Like, look, we've got to do some planning now to get this figured out.
And we look at this and we say, okay, if it does change and Social Security is taxable, like it says right here, does that change for those who are set up and planning for retirement? Or is this just kind of another little blip in the system?
Yeah, who knows what they're going to do? That's the uncertain issue is it's like, hey, we've got to capture taxes from somewhere. We've got to stabilize the programs. What are we going to do? I think if this happens, what you're going to see is an effect on more retirees. Right now, about 40 to 50% of retirees pay some form of tax on their Social Security. And I could see that going up maybe 60, 70. Now, I would assume the lowest segment of the population from an earning standpoint, if Social Security is all they have, yeah, they may not be paying any tax on this. But I could see where they would tax all the other income you have, which would basically mean, if you have any other source of income for that middle segment of America, they're going to have some additional taxes they wouldn't otherwise pay.
Yeah, I just can't imagine getting ready for this and not being prepared and going through a plan like you've been talking about.
Yeah, there's just so many risks that people are subject to that they're not taking care of. I mean, that's the amazing thing. I was reading back through Tom Hegna's book, Paychecks and Playchecks this morning, and it just continues to hit me. It's like during our working years, we insure for all these risks. None of us, very few of us, I shouldn't say none, very few of us are not going to have home insurance. Very few of us are not going to have automobile insurance. Very few of us are not going to have health insurance. But yet we go into retirement and it's like we just throw all caution to the wind and say, oh, hope it all works out. Looking forward to 30 years of unemployment. And what we're finding is it isn't working out.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, Dave, let's get to our next question from Joan here. With a Roth, do you have any thoughts about Congress making them taxable at some point, especially since the national debt is out of control?
Joan, I do have a lot of thoughts in regards to this, and let me just share a few of them. The biggest one is the Roth accounts are so small compared to the overall tax deferred buckets that we have out there. When we look at the tax deferred buckets, we're looking truly, CR, at about $30 trillion of assets, and that's growing every day. Now, again, we can have a whole market discussion that I am in the belief that the market's going to collapse here very soon, and we'll see a lot of that lost. But currently, we're at $30 trillion. Well, when you look at that and you look at a government that's needing money, I'm going to go over after the big fish versus the say $1.5 trillion that's sitting in Roth accounts, or 2 trillion, whatever it may end up being. I'm going to go after that big fish because it's easy money. And I'm not having to go back and change laws. I'm not doing anything that I didn't tell people I was going to do. I said, look, I'll give you a deduction now. In the future, I'm going to make you pay taxes on it.
Well, Dave, we're talking right here about the Roth. Now, we also have Social Security. So all these people are now coming and saying, Dave, what if everything's taxable? What do we do? So in that regard, what do you say to those people who are coming at this point in panic mode?
Yeah, the biggest thing I can tell you is don't panic. I mean, there's no need to. Your panic's not going to change anything. I mean, that's the reality of it. That being said, you can use it to take action. That's one of the great things about when we get concerned. The other day, we were on a phone call with a guy that we're working with. He's fully exposed to the market. He's in his 60s. He's gone through 3 market downturns, CR. So he went through the 1987 downturn, he went through the 2000 downturn, and he went through the 2008 downturn. And he lost everything during each of those. Well, now here he is fully exposed. He's in his 60s, and he's saying, look, I can't do this again. I mean, you could almost see him shaking on the Zoom meeting because he's so concerned about it. And that's what we're here to do, is let's take that out. Well, don't worry about it. You can't do anything different than let us start moving you forward. And yeah, it's going to take some time to do it, but let's start moving forward and get that taken care of, because again, your worrying is only going to shorten your lifespan.
Yeah. And I love that approach of just taking it slowly and moving forward, because like you said, I sit back and I look at a lot of this and I think there's a lot of people out there panicking for no reason, because like you said, it's not going to do you any good. You just got to make sure that you're taking care of the parts that you can control right now.
Well, and we see so many people right now with the market doing what it's doing that are in the same belief I am. They believe that this can't last. We've gone 13 years, one of the longest runs we've ever had in the history of America. And the problem is people don't understand it, so they think it can last. They think it's just going to go forever. You saw it recently with even Bitcoin. You see it a little bit. I'm not saying where that's going to end up, but we saw it with GameStop. The guys that got in last, that were watching everybody else, and then all of a sudden they're like, hey, I got to catch up, because everyone else has made a ton of money, and all my friends are sitting there at the restaurant telling me how wonderful things are, or via the Zoom meeting. Now I've got to catch up. They're the ones that are at most risk, because they didn't have the upside, and now all of a sudden if it crashes 30, 40%, they've lost a whole huge part of their retirement, especially if you're going into retirement. I mean, that's devastating if you lose 40% going into your retirement years.
Yeah, with that whole GameStop, it's amazing, because I had some friends reach out to me and said, hey, I'm trying to get on right now, but I can't because the financial company I'm going through is not letting anyone on, if you can imagine who. But with all of that, you're right. There's people that are jumping on because they're trying to say, I need to hurry and quickly put money aside. And they're taking all of these Bitcoins and other pieces that are, they do work for a majority of people or a group of people, but not for everyone. And everyone's trying to grasp at all of these straws by saying, I'm going to hurry and quickly build up where I've lost over the last 20 years.
Yeah, it's the same problem on a small end that we have on the big end. I've always said that the market's definitely skewed against the little guy. In fact, I've talked to statisticians before that were asked to create programs to help stock traders to be able to speed up the process so they could outperform the average investor. And that's happened. We've been at a minority. Well, you look at now, I get Rocket Mortgage, I guess now is the latest GameStop. And it went up like 700% or something. I can't remember the exact numbers. But again, you need to understand what you're doing, because if not, you're going to have, you may get lucky. But to me, that's like rolling the dice. They're in Vegas.
Yeah.
We're to go down to Vegas and just put the dice on the craps table and say, hey, let's hopefully this works out. Now, if you know what you're doing, absolutely, it's a completely different story. It's kind of like gambling. I have clients that are gamblers, that are professionals. Hey, they could sit down at a poker table and they're going to sweep the table because they know what they're doing. But if you don't, that's probably not the place you want to be spending your weekends.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Dave, let's get to my next question. I always slaughter most of the names that come through, but Zharida is, what is the recommended contribution to 401k if the employer does not match?
This is going to be a little long question. Generally, we would say nothing. So typically, I would say, hey, if you're not going to match, and most advisors believe that there's better places to put your money. Now, if there is a Roth provision in there and you've got substantial amounts of money that you may not be able to get into a Roth IRA, or maybe you can't get into a life insurance retirement plan or some of these other tax-free investments, then that story is going to change a little bit. It may also change a little bit depending on if you've not saved up enough and we need to fund that 401k bucket. And again, you can't get enough into it to even a traditional. If we've got to get the right amount, the mathematically correct amount in the tax deferred bucket, that may change too. But generally, we would say, hey, if there's no match, don't contribute. Only go up to the match and then redirect those assets other places, because traditionally, for most people, you're going to be able to get less fees and better situation for yourself from a long-term investment standpoint.
And let me ask a basic question with this. If I'm working for a company and they set up a 401k, but they don't match, what's the point of setting that up for them? Because I feel like that match is really a benefit to them.
Yeah, I don't mean to laugh here, CR, but good question. The other day I was talking to someone, and the stories you hear are, I appreciate that people share them with me. They make for great stories when we get together here. But you had a situation where their contribution from the employer, CR, was $100. I mean, again, I guess it's great that they can set up a plan and it's going to allow their employees to contribute more than you could into an IRA account, which you're going to have your limits to that are going to be much smaller. But really, $100, I saw 0.25% once, way back. This is almost 20 years ago. And I thought this was the worst thing ever. In fact, their employees, I was doing some accounting for the company. I knew some of the employees, and they came and they're like, this is ridiculous. It's like, he put this plan together, he's going to give us 0.25%. Come on.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, there can be various reasons. There could be good-hearted people that are saying, hey, I just can't afford to do anything myself, but I want you to be able to contribute higher amounts into your retirement if you have the money to do so. But yeah, you really should be putting some type of match in if you're going to do a plan for your company.
And like you said, if not, there's better options out there for them. So they're not just putting this money right there, especially if there's no match. So I totally agree.
And I think it's, you got to look at the goodwill of it all. When you look at it, it's like, what do you want your employees to do? You want to be motivated. You want to be excited. So you go in and you put a plan together and you think, oh, I'm going to do the right thing and I'm going to get them very excited and we're going to have the same benefits. Well, then if there's no match, you really just kind of offended them. At that point, you really haven't motivated. You've almost turned to the other way, because now you said, look, I'm committed to you, but really only this much. Yeah. I'm really not committed like every other employer out there is. I'm just going to commit this much. So now they've just got that in their minds and probably going to lose some of them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Dave, my next one's a little long from Fawn. The last class of baby boomers that were born in 1964 are expected to retire in the 10 years. Where do you see the stock market get impacted by the expected net outflow from registered accounts?
Fan, thanks for asking this question. I think there's two sides of this that we've got to look at from a stock market side. And again, this is where many people believe the stock market's going to substantially change. We're going to see some crashing. We're also going to see some maybe even deflation. Many people think that there's going to be a deflationary period, because you do have two issues you're looking at. Number one, all of these people who had to extend out their retirements from 2008, and many of the baby boomers that worked longer because of what happened there, now we're in a position that they're fully retiring. So they're not contributing into these plans anymore. And she's right. Now you're taking it off the table. But also, when you're in retirement, for many of them, they're going to spend a lot less than they did before. So now you've got a whole segment of the population that's spending less. They're not putting it into the market. And again, that's where I believe the market's going to have some really tough times over the next year or two, trying to figure out where it falls based upon the changes. Now, if you talk to Harry Dent, I was listening to him the other night. He says, there's hope that by 2020 or 2023, yes, get the right dates here, 2023, the millennials will be at a point where they'll be spending more and start making up for that. But we do have a window here that we've definitely got to be looking out for.
And Dave, you talked about maybe there's going to be some deflation and maybe reduction in the stock market. Do you see anything else that's really going to make a big impact as this last generation is at the door, basically?
Yeah, we see so much of it when we look across the board. I mean, we've got such a large group coming in. Again, you've got Social Security and Medicare that are going through the roof. When you look at the true cost to the government from that side of it, that's got to be paid for. So we've got to look at the tax rates. We've got to look at the market and what it's doing. It's just a weird time. In fact, when the podcast, we talk about it, and I said, look, it's all about three things. It's about timing, doing the right thing at the right time with the right person. Well, I think we're in a really unique time now. Some people would panic, and we have those doing it, but we're in a great time to be able to fix all of it. To say, look, the market hasn't crashed yet, so we can go into principal protection. Taxes haven't gone up yet, so we can pay the taxes and get into an environment. These risks can be taken off. We haven't had a long-term care event for most people, but so we can plan and prepare for that. Many people haven't yet taken their Social Security, so we can wait and figure out what the effects of that are. So I think it's a great time, but you've got to look at it from the right side of the coin. Or from others, it's probably the worst time in history because they're stressed to the hilt, wondering what's going to happen for the next 30 years in their lives.
And I do love what you said, that we are in the right time. And I think that's an important thing to talk about, because everyone is like you said, on the other side of the coin is having meltdowns or a lot of panicking going on. But you're right. I think we're in a great time, especially with taxes where they are compared to where they're going to be. And things haven't really changed with the new presidency yet, but there's a lot of opportunities right now. The market's good, but like you said, it's going to change. But so what if we're in that point right now where we're like, yeah, Dave, I totally agree. I need to do something now. What do we do? Because this is a point where if you don't take action now, it may change.
Yeah, the biggest thing that's got to be done is you've really got to start focusing on yourself and getting these risks taken off the table. You cannot continue to wait and believe that a year from now or 2 years from now, you'll get to it. We don't really have that long, in my opinion, with certain things. Now, again, if you've already diversified your portfolio in different ways, maybe you feel like you can. But when we look at systemic risk and what we're going to face, and Brian's talked about this a lot. I think he even talked about some last week. When we look at systemic risk, the belief is if this thing collapses, we're going to have a collapse of pretty much everything for a period of time. So no matter how well we're diversified, what we've got to do is get ourselves into principal protective products that no matter what the market does. I mean, can you imagine waking up, the market went down 40%, and you say, big deal. So I didn't make anything. I've got the same money I had yesterday. I mean, how much peace does that bring to your life versus waking up, as this gentleman did the other day, every morning going, please don't crash. Please don't crash. Yeah. Please wait till tomorrow. Let me figure this out. Let me get through this. Wait till tomorrow.
Yeah. So such great advice. All right, Dave, I want to get to another one here from James. Does placing your assets in a trust change the tax impact in retirement?
Depending upon which type of trust you're using, James, for the average American that's putting it into a living trust or a grantor trust, no, it's not going to change your taxes. What it's going to do is help you save some costs with probate. It's going to give some direction. Maybe if you've got young children and died early, what would happen to those kids who would be the guardian and stuff. But if you are a wealthy individual and you're wanting to put money into like an irrevocable life insurance trust, then yes, that can start changing the tax impact of what you're doing. But for most people, it's really just an ability to help simplify the process of death so that what you want to have happen happens, and that it can be done as simply and cheaply as possible.
If people have a question on trust, Dave, can they go to you? How do they figure out some more information on this? Because
you're welcome to come to me. I can answer basic questions. I will tell you, in the end, you're going to have to go to an attorney in your state that deals with this. And why do I say in your state? Because attorneys, unlike most of the rest of us that are professionals, they are limited to being able to practice in the state they have a license in. And each state also has different rules. So like as a CPA, I could do tax returns all across the country and be able to do that without much of a problem. But for an attorney, that's not the case. So again, happy to answer basic questions, but when it comes down to setting them up, the complexities, you're going to have to get connected with someone in your local area.
So that means you could be taking care of somebody in Chicago, for example, today for the CPA side.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I've done it for years. That's the great thing about my life is I can travel and go to different places and wake up the next morning somewhere else, having a different experience.
Dave, we've got one from Lachman. How long will the LIRP pay for long-term care?
So let me address a couple of things here. Number one is LIRP, for those that are new, is a life insurance retirement plan. It's using permanent insurance to solve the long-term care issue. It's going to be based upon the company. Now, most companies are going to cover for a 4-year period of time, or up to a 4-year period. So average long-term care stays somewhere between 2.8 and 3 years. They're going to cover 4 years, 25% of your death benefit per year, discounted to your age for a 4-year period of time.
Dave, I know we're getting close on time here, so I wanted to see if I could squeeze a few more questions in here. Karen's asking, if I'm already retired, I'm at 69 years old, is it too late for me to move to a 0% tax retirement going forward?
Karen, not necessarily. Now, it's going to require you to pay that entry fee of getting the money paid out, but we've got such large brackets now. I mean, that's one of the things when we look at it, especially when we look to 2026, when everything changes and the brackets shrink and the rates go back up, you may be in a perfect situation to do it because you don't have working income theoretically. Now, maybe you have a job, says you're already retired, so I'm assuming you're not doing any part-time work. So you've got a pretty low income threshold from your retirement earnings. Hey, can we take advantage of those brackets, get that money transferred now, and then take that tax risk off the table going forward?
So Dave, for those who don't know, tell us what this entrance fee is that you're talking about for Karen.
Yeah, the entrance fee is taking your business partner out. So what you're doing is you've got a silent partner to the government that has complete control of your earnings and what happens in your retirement. It's buying them out, saying, look, I'm going to buy you out right now when I know what the price is, versus doing it in a future period of time where you could double the price as my partner and I have to have no say in it.
Mm-hmm. And Dave, if you could give somebody a good rule of thumb where they're saying, okay, I'm getting closer to retirement. Obviously you want to work with people who are quite young, but if there's people, is there a particular age you're like, hey, you really need to start getting your act together? Because Karen here, she's 69 and she's at that door saying, okay, Dave, what do I do?
Yeah, the sad thing is the majority of the people we work with are north of 50, probably 55 to 70, if you said the average person we're working with. Perfect age, start when you're 20, when you're very young. I mean, that's the best thing. But for most people, really by 45, you need to start figuring this out. Now, if you're part of the fire community, I guess by 45, you think you're going to be retired. But for the rest of the world, 45 is a time that you've really got to figure it out because you've got 20, 25 good years. That's enough for most people to really get the retirement where they need it to be able to add their Social Security and other benefits on top of there and still be able to have a pretty decent retirement.
That's great. Dave, I got one from Irma here. I hope this one makes sense, but she's asking the 10% penalty on 401k, is it applied to the $10,000?
Irma, let me address this. And I think that the question doesn't have enough information. I will tell you that CR that the issue here is I'm not sure what they're doing with the 10,000. Now, if you are buying a home or you've got education costs and you're pulling $10,000 out under the government rules, to be able to do so, no, the 10% is not going to apply. You would have to pay your taxes, but you're not going to have to pay the penalty. I'm assuming that's what she's talking about. But if you don't have a qualified reason, then yes, any money you pull out before 59.5 that is not rolled over into another account, you're going to end up having to pay that penalty.
Yeah, I think you squeezing what I could get out of this. Some of these questions I throw at you are just very basic, so I appreciate those. This one from Bill. Due to an inheritance, I have a large taxable brokerage account that provides dividends that puts us in the IRMAA zone. Is there a way to take this account tax deferred other than giving it away?
There is a way to do it. What you're going to need to do is you're going to need to, again, do the transitions and look at going into a life insurance retirement account, putting it into the insurance product. That's one of the great ways to be able to get the money growing tax-free and being able to pull the money out tax-free. Now, there's going to be some rules you'll want to follow. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take you a while to be able to do this transition. But there are steps out there that you can take to be able to make this happen.
So in Bill's case, Dave, as we're looking into these insurance products or trying into maybe a life insurance retirement plan, what's the best option? Because I feel like this thing is a cusp of saying, okay, I need to do this, but where do we go?
Yeah, the best option is to get a plan together. I mean, that's the reality of it. Every once in a while, I'll meet with someone where they're in a situation we don't need to do a full plan, that it's all they really need is principal protection. Maybe they're in a situation that they're not going to qualify for insurance. They've already figured their Social Security out. Long-term care is just going to be off the table, and they know that. So we'll just do basic planning. But for most people, we want to put the whole plan together. We want to do that roadmap because that roadmap, when it gets done, we can start seeing what the stress is on that plan. We can start seeing what effects taxes are going to have. We can start seeing if you take your Social Security at the wrong time, what effect it's going to have. All of those things are part of that plan. And once people understand that that roadmap now gives them guidance in how they can direct their financial affairs going forward, it becomes very powerful for them.
Yeah, great advice. Well, Dave, I'm going to try to get one more question, but this one is going to need a backstory because as I ask this question, maybe those watching may not know this unless they've been on a webinar. But Karen's asking, so what was the percent Reagan had to pay when he only did 2 movies a year?
Okay, let me go back to the backstory on this, CR, and I'll try to tell as much information here as I can. So in the webinar, when we talk about it, we talk about how Ronald Reagan was originally proposed, and this part we don't go into this much detail in the webinar, but I'll give it to you here. So he had a contract to do 4 movies a year, and he started realizing that, look, those extra 2 movies, I'm in a 94% bracket. I'm going to lose 94% of that $200,000, making $100,000 per movie. I'm going to end up losing 94% of that to the federal government, and I'm going to lose most of the rest of the state of California. So he said, look, I'm only going to do 2 movies. I'm going to go to my ranch, ride my horses. It took him about 3 months to do a movie from the acting side. So it'd take him about 6 months a year, 6 months off, worked out very well. Well, back in that period of time, there were 24 different tax brackets. Now I think we've got 6 or 7. I don't know the exact number. I didn't look at it before the show. We got like 6 or 7. Back then it was 24. So even there, he was still probably paying north of 70% on his earnings up to there. And I think it was a break point. You get to a point, it's like, okay, I'm already paying 70%. Obviously I got to act, I've got to make money. But at some point, once we get to 94 consistently going forward, I'm done. I'm out. I'm not going to do this anymore. And another piece to that story, many people that may not think about or realize, guess who had the lowest tax brackets as president when they got put into president?
I don't know who.
Ronald Reagan. He got his revenge. He said, look, you guys took advantage of me when I was young and acting. Now I'm going to give back to America and let them have the lowest tax brackets they've ever had.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love that story just because it illustrates so much, and it really does tell us that taxes really can go up. And people always ask, is this really true? I mean, you're talking a couple of years, taxes are going to go up, but we really don't see it adjusting that much. But here's a great illustration of why it does change so much.
So if you look at even what's going on now, and you're exactly right, and it's easy to forget. I mean, 70s, yeah, it's been a while. We go back 50 years, 45, 50 years to get into the mid 70s. But when you look there, the tax brackets were double what they are now. It wasn't that long. And I think this is one of the problems we have even now with the market. Think of that person that's 35, 40 years old right now. They really haven't experienced a downturn in the market. When they got out of college or got into their careers, they probably didn't have that much money in 08 when everything crashed. So big deal, didn't really affect me that much. Well, now you're 13 years further ahead. The market's done nothing but go up, and you get greedy. You get to a point, it's like, oh, there's no way history can repeat itself. Well, folks, history repeats itself. We see it over and over and over and over again, and it's going to continue to do it as we look to the future.
Exactly. Well, Dave, parting words. We've got a couple minutes here. I just wanted to give you some time so you can get back to your clients, and I really appreciate your time. But parting words as we're getting ready to leave, and we've gone through a bunch of questions here. What do you have for those who are watching live or on replay to really help them understand how important it is to take some action today?
My parting words are going to come from the webinar or from the podcast. I mentioned we've got this Friday, and I'm not going to spoil it. There's great information inside of there. But again, now is the time to do the right thing with the right people. And when you look at it, you've got to get with someone that can educate you and help you understand it. That's one of the great things about what we do. And I see it in the eyes of people when we sit down with them. They're like, wait, everybody's told me all this stuff before, and they've disappeared. And in fact, we talk about it ourselves. Many times we're sending back, it's like, hey, they got paid on this stuff. Go back to them and have them educate you like they should have done day one. But they're like, they won't. They don't, they're gone, they're whatever. Well, you've got to get educated. You've got to have people that understand it so you can know how to do it yourself. Now, I realize everyone doesn't need to be a financial planner. I'm not telling you to do that, or a retirement risk consultant. But you need to understand it well enough that if you're sitting down with someone, a family or friend or a spouse or someone later, you can explain why you did what you did, and you can feel comfortable with that. So do the right thing, start planning for your retirement, at the right time, which is now. Again, we don't want these risks. We don't want the market to crash. We don't want these things to happen before you can get things structured the way you need to with the right people. And I'll tell you, I believe that we can do as good a job as anyone at helping you eliminate these risks and get yourself to a more safe and secure retirement.
Dave, such great advice. Thank you for taking time to come and answer all these questions. Thanks for taking time away from your Chicago client there. How fun that is to be able to be up in Chicago. It's not very fun to fly. We talked about that before the show right now, or even be out in public with everything right now. But I'm glad that you're able to get out and do some of these things.
Yeah. Would you like me to send you back some Chicago deep dish pizza? There's one right by the hotel that I usually go to. So maybe I can send you some pizza back.
That was the first thing I was going to ask. Do you have time for pizza? Because when I go to Chicago, that is the one thing I always go eat is that deep dish pizza.
Yeah. The problem is even the small. So I'll go and I'll get the small, and even the small is like so big it feeds you for like 3 days.
Yeah.
So I do take it back to the hotel. Usually that will become maybe a meal. But the problem is with this client, usually I'm eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner with them because we've got so much we got to get accomplished. But anyway, yeah, I'd love to be able to send you some back.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us and being here as we ask Dave all these retirement questions, and we will see you again next week.